boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. An interesting post-fight quote from Mr. Ohashi, who knew that Sebastian Hernandez was a problem for Junto Nakatani after seeing him spar Naoya Inoue and others at the Ohashi gym. All the fighters from Ohashi gym, except Naoya, got beaten to a pulp in sparring. He was very strong. I thought Nakatani might lose too. He beat everyone, including Nakajima, Kazuki, Oriental Pacific Super Bantamweight champion. He had so much power, his punches had no effect. I thought it would be tough, even for Nakatani. But if Mr. Ohashi was already privy to the kind of fighter that Sebastian Hernandez is and what threat he might pose to Junto, why make the fight? In making it, you're jeopardizing the big one. As I was watching Junto labor and languish with Sebastian, I thought to myself, they matched this guy way too tough in what was his Super Bantamweight debut, tough enough that we may not get the Inoue fight. Why would they do that if the Night of the Samurai card primarily was intended to be a precursor to Inoue versus Nakatani, just a little appetizer before they bring out the main course, unless it was not their intention to do that? I've serious reservations about this quote and what this really means for the Inoue versus Nakatani fight, whether or not Mr. Ohashi really wants to make it, and what his perception of Junto Nakatani was before that Sebastian Hernandez fight versus what it might be now. Listen, I don't put nothing past nobody. There are no other bantamweights or super bantamweights I can think of that ever achieved the celebrity that Inoue has achieved, made the kind of money that he's made, enough that Mr. Ohashi maybe doesn't want to jeopardize that with the Nakatani fight, not beforehand, so he decided to throw a little monkey wrench in there to make sure that Junto doesn't make it to the Inoue fight. Neutralize the threat, because if he gets beat by Sebastian, well, there goes the neighborhood, and there goes the Inoue fight. Now, this doesn't speak to Naoya Inoue, the fighter. This doesn't speak to how he might feel about Junto. He might want to do it, but perhaps Mr. Ohashi, seeing that he's got a good thing going, he doesn't want to screw that up. The Junto Nakatani fight would easily be the biggest fight ever made between two Japanese nationals, two Japanese fighters. It's a whale of a fight in the Far East. However, if something were to happen to Inoue in that fight, well, there goes Mr. Ohashi's breadwinner. There is no successor, as he is a once-in-a-lifetime fighter, a generational talent. So if you're Mr. Ohashi, do you really want to gamble that for one fight on one night, when you can make steady money, safe money, over a longer duration of time? The proposed date for Inoue versus Nakatani, if it even happens, is May of next year. Perhaps Mr. Ohashi felt one way about Junto before the fight and feels a different way now. Now that he's seen him labor and struggle with Sebastian, he might feel more confident that his man can beat him. And maybe that's warmed him up to the fight, to where now he's a little bit more willing to make it. Now he's a little bit more confident that Inoue can handle Junto. I know that I am. It's a curious quote, like I said. If you know firsthand that this guy was beating the crap out of the kids in your gym, save Inoue, why would you then want to put him in there with Junto? He might ruin the fight, unless that's what you wanted. I thought to myself, why didn't they just get him Marlon Tapales or Luis Neri, Ramon Cardenas? Somebody who's been in there with Inoue before, so that when Junto fights him, we can cross-compare who did it better. In essence, building the fight between them, that if that's what you're doing, and that's what your intentions are, you don't match Junto this tough. In men's welterweight news, talks between Manny Pacquiao and Romero for the WBA title fell through. Manny Pacquiao's proposed fight with WBA welterweight champion Romero will not be going ahead. Pacquiao returned to boxing in July at 46 and drew with Mario Barrios in his challenge to become the sport's second oldest champion ever. In October, the Ring reported Pacquiao would challenge for a title once again, this time against welterweight champion Romero, in mind for a January date. What may have hampered those talks are talks for a Mayweather rematch that Netflix is interested in putting on. I don't get the sense that these talks fell through so much as Manny found something better to do. And I don't think it's from any pressure that the WBA is applying on Rolly to fight his mandatory Shakram Giyasov, because they stand to make more money if Rolly defends the belt against Manny than Shakram. So I don't think that's the reason this fight fell through, so much as Manny found something better to do. Pacquiao versus Romero was always a very poor excuse for a money fight. Whatever remains of Manny's star power in tandem with Rolly's perceived online celebrity, that doesn't really translate into real dollars in real life with real people. People on the internet find him mildly amusing, but they don't pay money to see him. Rolly is a well-known fighter in boxing circles, though well-known doesn't necessarily translate to well-liked or well-respected. He's a bit of a running gag to some people, and a testament to how far the American boxing scene has fallen in recent years, because in previous ones, a fighter as shit as a Rolly Romero wouldn't be able to sniff at a welterweight title. But in this era, he can. He's already ruled out unifying titles with Devin Haney for whatever reason, even though boxing Devin pays a lot better than boxing Shakram Giyasov. He likely ruled out that fight with Devin, thinking to himself that he can fight an aged Manny Pacquiao in his mid-40s and make money that way. But now that Manny's off the table, you have to wonder if he won't warm to the idea of unifying titles with Bevin. It is a unification match with the WBA's blessing. It would allow him to circumvent his mandatory challenger, Shakram Giyasov, simultaneously allowing him to make more money. More than he'd make fighting Shakram. Alternatively, he also has the option of dropping the belt and giving it to Shakram, surrendering the WBA title in pursuit of a rematch with Brian Garcia. Can do that too, provided that Brian beats Mario Barrios in their upcoming WBC title fight, and I think he's going to. Rolly can do that. Brian needs revenge. By the title going to Shakram Giyasov, order would be restored in the welterweight division, and the natural process of elimination would be allowed to commence, because a fighter like Rolly can only really achieve a title through chicanery, through backdoor deals, and brown paper bag money. Protection. Left to his own devices and exposed to the elements and what other fighters the welterweight division has to offer, like Shakram Giyasov, any fighter, any halfway decent fighter, beats Rolly. You tell yourself, well, Rolly is at least more well-known than a Shakram Giyasov, so why would the title going to Shakram be a good thing? He doesn't have a profile. He doesn't have an ego either. Shakram Giyasov, even with a belt, is not a fighter that you have to break the piggy bank to make fights for him, whereas Rolly, he thinks he's top billing. Thinks he belongs on pay-per-view. He's a more expensive fighter to make fights for. We often talk about fighters and their demands driving the cost of everything up, and how that results in more and more box office fights. Whereas a fighter like Shakram Giyasov and his handlers, they're realists. They know a guy like Shakram don't belong behind a paywall. They know he's not box office worthy. It's cheaper to make fights for him, and thus the welterweight division is allowed to move on, naturally, organically. So that if Shakram Giyasov gets his hands on that WBA title in the not-so-distant future, maybe he can go unify it with Lewis Crocker. They're both matchroom fighters. So is Conor Benn, who's said to be returning to the welterweight division. Maybe at some point, he can fight Shakram for the black and gold belt. Or maybe Shakram can look to unify it with Bevin on one of Turki El Sheik's shows. If Rolly drops it to avoid him and goes another route, if Shakram Giyasov becomes WBA champion, I happen to think it's a lot better for the welterweight division. He's a real contender. Rolly is not. Rolly got that belt, that welterweight title, not fighting any welterweights. It's a goddamn joke. Over to Manny Pacquiao, who likely walked away from a fight with Rolly in favor of a fight with Floyd Mayweather, a rematch financed by Netflix, accenting what I've been telling you all along. That sales pitch never went over well with me. That Manny Pacquiao at age 46 has returned to boxing because he wants to be the oldest welterweight champion? You're telling me that after all these years, you're still subjecting your body to the rigors of a camp and the rigors of boxing so that you can be the oldest guy doing it? Bullshit. You need money. It's the only reason any prize fighter becomes a prize fighter, for the fucking prizes. Manny Pacquiao
having a history of never being all that good with money and having no mind for business, it's conceivable that over the years he's burned through a lot of the money that he's made, and so he needs more of it, which is why he's still fighting.
And I think something similar applies to Floyd, who in the subsequent years that have followed his retirement from professional boxing has kept busy almost every single year with exhibition after exhibition, scheduling those exhibitions at a greater rate than some professional boxers, some active boxers. That if you're doing that many of those things, did you really retire?
Now, only one or two of those exhibitions were actually a blip on the radar. The one with Logan Paul.
But the others, like the one with his old sparring partner, Don Moore, or John Gotti's grandson, those two exhibitions are the one in the UK that was reported to have had very low ticket sales against Chalmers, a reality TV star. I don't imagine that Floyd could have made very much from those exhibitions since they were billed as pay-per-views that nobody bought.
He needs money too. That's the only reason he'd still be fighting at his age. The overhead of his expensive lifestyle is likely to catch up to him if he doesn't keep the money coming in. So he needs money too.
He needs money. Manny needs money. That's why they're doing it. But in doing so, they've managed to spark Netflix's curiosity. Netflix, who only wants to stage the biggest of the big live boxing events, and they're rumored to be throwing some money at this one. Floyd also announced an exhibition with Mike Tyson that's supposed to be going down in Africa. I don't know if that's supposed to go down before or after the Pacquiao rematch. But he is already set to keep a more active schedule of fights than both the Charlo brothers, than Keith Thurman, and many other of the PBC's boxers.
Manny and Floyd's initial meeting turned out to be a high-profile dud. It didn't live up to expectations in terms of a super fight. So all these years later, that they're all these years older, I don't expect the rematch to be better. But because it's on a massive platform like Netflix, if they put it together, people will watch it.
Accessibility is the reason. If you tried to bill it as a pay-per-view, it wouldn't do anywhere near what the first one did. But if it's a regular fight, available to all existing Netflix subscribers, they'll tune in, so long as it doesn't cost them anything extra.
They'll watch it.
In men's junior middleweight news, Sebastian Fundora versus Keith Thurman junior middleweight title clash is being targeted for early 2026. The rescheduled clash between Keith Thurman and Sebastian Fundora is being targeted for early 2026. Thurman was supposed to challenge Sebastian for his WBC title in October, but the bout was postponed after Fundora suffered a hand injury in training. Fundora is coming off a 7th-round stoppage win over Tim Kazoo, while Thurman fought and knocked out Jock Barvis in March. The night of, it will likely have been a year's time from Thurman's last bout. He's a quasi-retired fighter.
Which means if he's still fighting, it's because he's strapped for cash too. It's the only reason he'd be lingering around a sport he's always had his foot halfway out the door of. In all these years that Keith Thurman has not been fighting, he could have segued into an analyst role, like what you see from Chris Algieri and Paulie Malignaggi, Jamel Herring.
Though, of course, being an analyst doesn't pay the same as still fighting, and thus, that's why he's rolling the dice with Sebastian Fundora in a fight I think many people are picking him to lose. There's no mention of when exactly this fight is going to happen. It could theoretically happen on the undercard of Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios, what is both a Golden Boy and PBC promotion that will be distributed on both the DAZN and Amazon platforms. When they said that Sebastian injured his hand, and that's why the fight got postponed, I didn't believe that.
I still don't. What I think is, they initially wanted that to be a main event, but by itself, it's just not strong enough. It's not gonna sell anything. Now, as a co-main event to a main event, it might do better. So maybe this is the co-main event to Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios?
Because we still don't know what that undercard is going to look like, or maybe they'll schedule this fight for the undercard of Mayweather versus Pacquiao too. You have to figure that TGB, which is just another way of saying PBC, will be at the helm of the promotion for Mayweather versus Pacquiao 2 if it happens. Thus, there should be PBC fighters on that undercard. Tom Brown was the registered promoter for Manny Pacquiao's last fight, with Mario Barrios, and in all likelihood, he'll be the registered promoter for his next fight with Floyd Mayweather. And on that undercard, we might see Fundora versus Thurman.
That fight by itself doesn't generate anything. Sebastian Fundora, even though he's been on a tier, still doesn't have the drawing power to carry a show all by himself. And Thurman hasn't been relevant in years. So I don't think the intention in rescheduling this fight is for these two guys to headline the show. I think they'll reschedule it to a bigger card.
And the biggest one that I can think of involving the PBC would have to be the Mayweather versus Pacquiao rematch financed by Netflix, who would provide more than enough money to make more than enough other fights happen on that undercard. It's just unfortunate that Netflix doesn't make a more earnest commitment towards staging boxing matches on their platform with some regularity,
instead of just these oversized novelty shows.
They could easily house two promotional outfits in the PBC and Top Rank, and if they were to bring them into the fray, I'd call that the ideal scenario. They've got more than enough money to give both the PBC and Top Rank an annual budget that would see fights happening on their platform throughout the calendar year. I wonder if they're not warming to that idea, since they are still doing boxing to some extent. For what they're paying out for these one-and-done events like Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson or Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua, the money it takes to make those shows, they could easily finance a year's worth of boxing. Maybe it's something they'll consider in 2026. Over to the Fondora versus Thurman fight. Still no pressure from the World Boxing Council for Sebastian to satisfy his mandatory challenger in Virgil Ortiz. They're giving this kid a lot of wiggle room. I believe Sebastian became WBC champion in April of last year, which is over a year ago. Virgil became interim champion in August,
which is also over a year ago.
And since then, we've seen no semblance of any pressure or urgency from the World Boxing Council to order the fight between them. Not if you're giving Sebastian the wiggle room to give Keith Thurman a title shot. Keith Thurman, who's done absolutely nothing as a junior middleweight to earn a shot at a world title. But with the World Boxing Council, it's not about the fighters earning a title shot so much as them earning the biggest sanctioning fees. That's what their rationale is.
Their entire school of thought and every decision they make rests on what fight gets them more money.
So this is a fight that I think Sebastian Fundora wins. Both guys will have been out of action for a considerable amount of time, but Sebastian is bigger, Sebastian is younger. I think Sebastian wins, and Keith Thurman, even taking on a fight like this when he's been so sparsely active, only accents his desperation. He needs money.
That's the only reason he's doing it.